Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
What would you do if one morning you opened your front door to find a legal notice? Your husband filing for divorce, listing nights you spent at another man's house as evidence? How could everything flip so quickly when I was sure I held all the cards? My name is Zelma Lenore, and I'm 32 years old. I work as an office manager at a mid-sized accounting firm in suburban Phoenix. For 8 years, I'd been married to Gregory Madsen, an IT specialist who works for a tech consulting company downtown. We have an 8-year-old daughter named Lila, who's the light of both our lives, or at least she was supposed to be. The thing about Greg is that he's always been careful, methodical. Some might call it controlling, but I prefer to think of him as overly cautious about everything. He checks the locks twice before bed, reviews our bank statements every week, and asks detailed questions about where I'm going and when I'll be back. It started to feel suffocating after a while. That's how I reconnected with Noah Trell, an old college friend who moved to Phoenix about 6 months ago. Noah's 33, single, and works in marketing for a local brewery. When he reached out through Facebook, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Someone who remembered the person I used to be before I became Greg's wife and Lila's mom. It was a Thursday evening in late October when everything started to unravel. I was standing in our kitchen, loading the dishwasher after dinner, when I decided to bring up what had been on my mind for weeks. "Greg, I need to talk to you about something," I said, not looking up from the plates I was rinsing. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, probably reviewing some clients' network security issues. "What's up?" he asked, his fingers still typing. "Noah invited me to stay over at his place this weekend. Just for old time's sake, you know. We used to have these marathon movie nights in college, and he thought it would be fun to catch up properly." The typing stopped. Greg looked up at me with that expression I knew too well, the one where he was trying to process whether I was being serious. "Stay over? Like, overnight?" "Yes, overnight. It's not a big deal, Greg. We're adults, and Noah's been a friend for over a decade. I think it would be good for me to have some time away from all the routine here." Greg closed his laptop slowly. "Zelma, you want to spend the night at another man's apartment? How's that not a big deal?" I could feel the familiar frustration building in my chest. This was exactly the kind of reaction I'd expected from him. "Because you're making it weird when it doesn't have to be weird. Noah is my friend. Just my friend. The fact that he's male doesn't automatically make it inappropriate. It's not about him being male. It's about boundaries in our marriage. What message does that send to Lila? What message does it send to our friends and family?" I turned around to face him fully, crossing my arms. "The message it sends is that you trust your wife. That you don't think I'm going to do something inappropriate just because I spend one night catching up with an old friend. This isn't about trust, Zelma. This is about respect for our marriage, for our family. No, Greg, this is about control. You've always been like this. You need to know where I am every second of the day. You question every friendship I have, especially if it involves men. I'm tired of feeling like I'm in prison." Greg stood up from the table, his jaw tightening. "That's not fair, and you know it. I've never stopped you from having friends. I've never stopped you from going out, but spending the night at another man's place crosses a line that shouldn't need to be explained." "What line? The imaginary line you've drawn in your head because you can't handle the idea that I might enjoy someone else's company? The line that married people don't cross when they want to stay married." I felt something snap inside me. Maybe it was months of feeling suffocated. Or maybe it was the way he said it so matter-of-factly, like he was explaining a simple rule to a child. "Fine," I said, my voice getting louder. "Here's how this is going to work. Either you trust me enough to let me stay at Noah's place tomorrow night, or I'll file for divorce. Because I'm not going to spend the rest of my life with someone who thinks so little of me." The silence that followed was deafening. From upstairs, I could hear Lila's TV playing some cartoon, oblivious to the bomb I'd just dropped in our kitchen. Greg stared at me for a long moment. His face went through several expressions: surprise, hurt, anger, and finally something I couldn't quite read. "You're giving me an ultimatum," he said quietly. "I'm giving you a choice. Trust me or lose me." He picked up his laptop and headed toward the stairs. I need to think about this. After he left, I felt a mixture of triumph and anxiety. I'd finally stood up for myself, finally drawn my own line in the sand. But there was something in Greg's eyes when he walked away that made me uneasy. I pulled out my phone and texted Noah, "It's happening. Can I come over tomorrow night?" His response came back quickly. "Of course. Are you sure about this, though? Seems like a big step." "I'm sure," I typed back. "I need to do this for me." But even as I sent the message, I heard Greg's car starting in the driveway. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. Where was he going? The next evening, I packed a small overnight bag while Greg watched from our bedroom doorway. He hadn't said much since our argument the night before, just nodded when I reminded him that I'd be staying at Noah's. "What should I tell Lila?" he asked. "Tell her Mommy's having a sleepover with an old friend, just like she does sometimes. And when she asks why Daddy can't come too?" I stopped folding my pajamas and looked at him. "Tell her that sometimes grown-ups need time with their own friends." Greg nodded slowly. "What time will you be back tomorrow?" "I don't know. Afternoon sometime. We'll probably sleep in, maybe grab brunch." "Okay." The conversation felt stilted, formal, like we were roommates discussing logistics rather than husband and wife. But I pushed down the guilt and finished packing. Noah's apartment was in a trendy part of downtown, about 20 minutes from our suburban neighborhood. It was a modern complex with a pool and a fitness center, the kind of place I'd imagined living when I was younger, before mortgages and parent-teacher conferences became my reality. "You made it," Noah said when he opened the door. He was wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt, looking relaxed and welcoming. "Come on in." His place was exactly what I'd expected. Minimalist furniture, a huge TV mounted on the wall, and not much in the way of personal touches. It was clean and organized, but it felt temporary somehow. "This is nice," I said, setting my bag down by the door. "Thanks. It's not much, but it works for me. Can I get you something to drink? I've got wine, beer, or I could make coffee." "Wine sounds perfect." We settled on his couch with glasses of red wine and started catching up properly. Noah told me about his job at the brewery, the dating scene in Phoenix, and his plans to maybe buy a house in the next year or two. I found myself talking about things I hadn't discussed with anyone in years. My college dreams, the novel I'd started writing but never finished, the places I wanted to travel. "You seem different than when we were messaging," Noah said after we'd been talking for a couple of hours. "More relaxed." I feel more relaxed. It's nice to just be myself for a while, you know? Not Greg's wife or Lila's mom. Just Zelma. Is it really that bad at home? I considered the question. It's not bad exactly. It's just predictable. Safe. Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing into this role I never really chose. What do you mean? I mean, I got married young, had Lila right away, and suddenly my whole identity became about taking care of other people. Don't get me wrong. I love my daughter more than anything. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices. Noah refilled our wine glasses. "It's not too late to make different choices now." Something in the way he said it made me look at him more carefully. "What kind of different choices?" "Whatever kind you want. You're 32, Zelma. You've got a lot of life left to live." We talked until almost 2 in the morning. When I finally went to sleep in his guest room, I felt more like myself than I had in years. I even took a selfie on his couch before heading to bed and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Late night catching up with old friends." Sometimes you need to remember who you used to be. The responses came quickly. My sister Sophie commented, "Are you sure about this, Z?" But most of my friends were supportive. "Good for you." "And you deserve some fun," filled the comments. What I didn't notice was Greg's car parked across the street from Noah's building. or the way he carefully photographed my car in the visitor parking spot before driving away. The following week, Greg suggested we have dinner with some friends at our usual spot, a bistro called Marcello's, where we'd been going for years. I thought it was a good sign that he wanted to get back to normal after our argument. I invited Tom and Jennifer and Mike and Sarah, he said, just like old times. These were couples we'd known for years, people who'd been at our wedding and had watched Lila grow up. I was looking forward to seeing them, especially after the emotional high of my night at Noah's. But when we arrived at the restaurant, something felt off. The usual warm greetings seemed forced, and I caught Tom and Mike exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. "So, Zelma," Jennifer said after we'd ordered appetizers, "Greg mentioned you had a girls' night last weekend?" I glanced at Greg, confused. Not exactly a girls' night. I stayed over at my friend Noah's place. We were college friends, and he moved to town recently. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Sarah cleared her throat and changed the subject to her kids' soccer season, but I could feel the tension at the table. As the evening went on, I found myself overcompensating, trying to lighten the mood with jokes and stories. At one point, I laughed about Greg being a little clingy sometimes and mentioned how boring our usual routine had become. "Marriage isn't supposed to be exciting every day," Tom said quietly. "That's not what makes it work." "Of course not," I said quickly. "I just meant that it's healthy to maintain your own friendships and interests. Greg knows he can trust me." Mike looked directly at Greg. "How are you handling all this, man?" Greg cut his steak methodically before answering. "I'm learning a lot about trust lately." Something in his tone made me nervous, but I pushed the feeling away. These were our friends. They'd understand once I explained properly. "The thing is," I continued, "I think it's important for couples to have independence. I would never stop Greg from spending time with his friends, even female friends. Marriage shouldn't be a prison." "Nobody said it was," Sarah said, her voice cooler than usual. Greg paid the check without asking for contributions, something he never did. "I'm going to head home and relieve the babysitter," he said. "Zelma, are you coming?" "I thought maybe we could all go get drinks somewhere else," I suggested. But the other couples were already making excuses about early mornings and babysitters. In the parking lot, I overheard Jennifer whisper to Sarah, "I can't believe she actually stayed at that guy's place." "What's that supposed to mean?" I called out, but they were already getting into their cars. The drive home was silent. When we got to the house, Greg paid the babysitter and went straight to his office, closing the door behind him. I sat in our living room, replaying the evening and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. These people had known me for years. They knew I wasn't the kind of person who would cheat on her husband. Why were they acting like I'd committed some terrible crime? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Madsen, this is attorney James Crawford. Your husband has asked me to reach out regarding some potential separation discussions. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience." My hands started shaking as I read the message twice, then 3 times. Greg had contacted a lawyer? Without even talking to me first? I confronted Greg that night after Lila had gone to bed. He was in our bedroom, reading on his tablet like nothing had happened. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, showing him the text from the lawyer. He looked at the screen calmly. "Exactly what it says. I think we should discuss separation." "Separation?" "Greg, I stayed one night at a friend's house. One night. How does that justify separation?" "It's not just about one night, Zelma. It's about what that night represents. It's about the ultimatum you gave me. It's about the fact that you're willing to threaten our marriage to get what you want." I sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to process this. I wasn't threatening our marriage. I was trying to save it. I was trying to get you to trust me. By threatening to divorce me if I didn't let you sleep at another man's house. Noah is not another man. He's my friend. And I shouldn't have to get permission from you to maintain my friendships. Greg set down his tablet and looked at me directly. "Tell me honestly, Zelma, what did you and Noah talk about that night?" "We talked about college, about his job, about life, normal friend stuff." "Did you talk about me?" I hesitated. "Some. I mean, you're my husband. Of course you came up. What did you say about me?" "I don't remember exactly. We talked about a lot of things." "Did you tell him you felt trapped in our marriage?" The question hit me like a slap. How could he possibly know that? I may have mentioned that I sometimes feel like I've lost my independence. Did you tell him you wondered what your life would be like if you'd made different choices? My stomach dropped. Greg, did you tell him that marriage shouldn't be a prison? You were listening somehow. You were spying on me. Greg's expression didn't change. I wasn't spying on anyone, but it's interesting that you're more upset about how I know than about what you actually said. What I said was private conversation between friends. Everyone needs someone to vent to sometimes. And did Noah suggest that it wasn't too late to make different choices? I felt trapped.
200 messages, deleted photos, a folder called Don't Open.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Like every word I said was making things worse. You're twisting everything. You're making normal conversation sound like something it wasn't. What else happened that night, Zelma? Nothing happened. We talked, we watched a movie, I slept in his guest room. That's it. And the next morning, we had coffee and I came home. Greg, you're scaring me. How do you know all this? He stood up and walked to our dresser. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to understand what's happening to our marriage. What's happening is that you're being paranoid and controlling, just like I said. You're proving my point. Am I? Or am I paying attention to my wife for the first time in years? What's that supposed to mean? It means I've been thinking about a lot of things lately. About how often you complain about our life together. About how you light up when you talk about Noah but seem bored when you talk to me. About how you were willing to risk our marriage for one night with him. It wasn't about him specifically. It was about my freedom to make my own choices. And what choice did you make, Zelma? The question hung in the air between us. I wanted to say I'd chosen to maintain an innocent friendship, but something in Greg's tone made me hesitate. I chose to trust that my husband would support me, I said finally. We'll see what the truth is soon enough, he said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our conversation and trying to figure out how Greg seemed to know so much about what Noah and I had discussed. The next morning, while he was at work and Lila was at school, I searched the house. I found the spare phone hidden in our laundry room, tucked behind the detergent bottles. It was an older model smartphone, and when I turned it on, I saw several apps I didn't recognize. Recording apps. Location tracking apps. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the phone's contents. There were photos of my car at Noah's apartment building, time-stamped and dated. There were screenshots of my Instagram post from that night. There were even audio files, though I couldn't bring myself to listen to them. Greg had been collecting evidence. But evidence of what exactly? I hadn't done anything wrong, had I? The meeting with the lawyers was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I'd hired my own attorney, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who specialized in family law. She'd seemed confident when I explained the situation to her over the phone. Emotional affairs can be difficult to prove, she'd said, and if nothing physical happened, we should be able to work out a reasonable settlement. But sitting in the conference room at James Crawford's office, looking across the table at Greg and his lawyer, I realized I might have underestimated the situation. Mrs. Madsen, Crawford began, my client is seeking dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences, with specific concerns about marital misconduct and household stability. Marital misconduct? Patricia interjected. Mr. Crawford, my client spent one night at a friend's house. That hardly constitutes misconduct. Crawford opened a folder and began laying out photographs on the table. These images show Mrs. Madsen's vehicle at the residence of Noah Trell on October 28th, arriving at 7:23 p.m. and remaining until 11:47 a.m. the following morning. I stared at the photos. They were clear, time-stamped, and undeniably showed my car in Noah's parking lot. Mr. Crawford, Patricia said, there's nothing illegal about visiting a friend. Of course not. However, when combined with other evidence, it paints a concerning picture. He laid out printed screenshots of text messages. These are communications between Mrs. Madsen and Mr. Trell, obtained legally through shared phone plan records. My heart sank as I saw my own words printed out in black and white. Messages I'd sent to Noah over the past few months, complaining about Greg, talking about feeling trapped, discussing my doubts about my marriage. One message made me cringe. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd married someone more adventurous. Someone who understood that life is meant to be lived, not just endured. Another, Greg is a good father, but as a husband, I feel like I'm slowly disappearing. And the worst one, I wish you were here every night. It's so easy to talk to you. Mr. Crawford, Patricia said, her voice tight, private communications between friends don't constitute evidence of adultery. You're absolutely right. However, they do establish a pattern of emotional intimacy outside the marriage, combined with deliberate deception and ultimatum-based manipulation of the marital relationship. Crawford laid out more documents. Bank records showing Mrs. Matson used the joint account to pay for ride-sharing services to Mr. Trell's residence on multiple occasions. Phone records showing daily contact between Mrs. Madsen and Mr. Trell, often lasting hours and frequently occurring during times when Mr. Madsen was at work or caring for their daughter. I felt like I was watching my life being dissected by strangers. Every innocent conversation, every moment of frustration with my marriage, every ride to Noah's place for coffee or lunch, it all looks so much worse when presented as evidence. Mrs. Madsen, Crawford continued, did you or did you not give your husband an ultimatum regarding your overnight stay at Mr. Trell's residence? I looked at Patricia, who nodded slightly. Yes, but... And did you or did you not tell your husband you would file for divorce if he didn't agree to your demands? I was trying to get him to trust me. By threatening to end your marriage if he expressed concerns about your relationship with another man? It wasn't like that. Crawford pulled out another document. This is a statement from your daughter's teacher, expressing concern about Lila's recent behavioral changes and academic performance. She's become withdrawn and anxious, particularly around discussions of family. That hit me harder than anything else. I'd been so focused on my own needs, my own feelings of being trapped, that I hadn't noticed how the tension at home was affecting Lila. Mr. Crawford, Patricia said, what exactly is your client seeking? Primary physical custody of the minor child, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Madsen pending successful completion of counseling. Division of assets according to Arizona community property law, with the family home remaining with the primary custodial parent to provide stability for the child. The room started spinning. Supervised visitation? Greg, you can't be serious. Greg spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. I'm trying to do what's best for Lila. She needs stability right now. I'm her mother, and I'm her father, and I'm the parent who's been putting her needs first. Crawford slid another document across the table. Mrs. Madsen, these are the divorce papers. You've been served. 2 weeks later, I was standing in what used to be my kitchen, watching strangers box up my belongings under the supervision of both lawyers. The court had granted Greg temporary custody and possession of the house, pending the final divorce proceedings. Mom, why can't you just say you're sorry? Lila asked, tugging on my shirt. She'd been staying with Greg's parents while the lawyers sorted everything out. But she was here today to see me pack. It's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes have big consequences. But Daddy says you chose to leave. I knelt down to her level, trying to find words that would make sense to an 8-year-old. Daddy and I disagree about some things, and sometimes when people disagree too much, they can't live together anymore. But I want you both to live here. I know, baby. I want that too. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true anymore. The past 2 weeks had been a nightmare of legal documents, family meetings, and awkward conversations with friends who'd clearly chosen sides. My own sister Sophie had stopped returning my calls after I tried to explain my side of the story. You had an emotional affair, Zelma, she'd said during our last conversation. I don't care if you didn't sleep with him. You checked out of your marriage emotionally, and now you're surprised that Greg noticed? My mother, Marjorie, was still supportive, but even she seemed confused by how quickly everything had fallen apart. I just don't understand how sleeping at a friend's house led to all this, she kept saying. But I was beginning to understand. It wasn't about one night at Noah's apartment. It was about months of complaining about my marriage to another man. It was about seeking emotional intimacy outside my relationship with Greg. It was about being willing to threaten divorce to get my way, never imagining that Greg might call my bluff. "Mrs. Madsen," Crawford said, approaching with a clipboard, "we need you to sign off on the final inventory." I looked around the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where I'd helped Lila with homework, where I'd had that fateful argument with Greg just a month ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. "Where will I be living?" I asked Patricia. "Your mother has offered to let you stay with her temporarily. We're working on finding you a suitable apartment for the supervised visitation periods." Supervised visitation. The words still stung every time I heard them. A social worker would be present every time I wanted to spend time with my own daughter, at least until I completed the court-ordered counseling and could demonstrate stable living conditions and appropriate boundaries. Greg walked into the kitchen, carrying Lila's school backpack. "Her homework is done, and she has a math test tomorrow," he said to me. "I'll pick her up at 6. "Greg, can we talk privately for a minute?" He glanced at the lawyers, who nodded and stepped into the living room. "What is it, Zelma?" "I want you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you or Lila." "I know that." "Then why won't you consider counseling? Why won't you try to work this out?" Greg was quiet for a long moment. "Because I can't trust you anymore, and I can't teach Lila that marriage is something you can threaten to throw away whenever you don't get what you want. I made a mistake. Can't we move past it? You made a series of choices, Zelma. You chose to share our private business with another man. You chose to seek emotional support from him instead of working on our marriage. You chose to give me an ultimatum instead of having an honest conversation about what you needed. And when I called your bluff, you're acting like I'm the one who destroyed our family." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that he was making it sound worse than it was. But looking at him now, calm, resolved, and somehow more confident than I'd seen him in years, I realized that he'd already made peace with his decision. "The supervised visitation is temporary," he said quietly. "If you do the work the court is asking for, if you can show that you're committed to putting Lila's needs first, we can revisit the custody arrangement." "And us? Is there any chance for us?" Greg looked around the kitchen, then back at me. "I loved you, Zelma. I love the woman I married, the mother of my daughter. But that woman wouldn't have done what you did. That woman wouldn't have been willing to blow up our family because she felt bored." Crawford returned with the final papers. "Mrs. Madsen, if you'll sign here, we can finalize the temporary arrangements." As I signed my name on document after document, I thought about the night this all started. I'd been so sure that Greg would back down, so confident that he needed me more than I needed him. I'd thought I was calling his bluff, asserting my independence, proving that I couldn't be controlled. Instead, I'd proven that actions have consequences, that marriages require more than just not cheating, and that the person you think will always be there might surprise you when you push them too far. "Mommy, are you crying?" Lila asked, appearing at my side. "Just a little, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups cry when big changes happen." "Will the changes make you happy?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw Greg's eyes, Greg's determination, and a wisdom that seemed too old for her 8 years. "I don't know yet, baby, but I hope they'll help me become a better person." Greg took Lila's hand and walked her toward the door. "Come on, kiddo. Let's go home." As they left, I realized that, for the first time in this whole mess, Greg had said something that felt completely honest. He was taking our daughter home, and I was the one who had chosen to leave. The movers finished loading my boxes into the truck. Patricia handed me copies of all the legal documents. Crawford shook my hand professionally and wished me luck with the counseling. And then I was standing alone in the empty house, holding the keys that I was supposed to leave on the kitchen counter. I thought about Noah, who'd stopped returning my calls after the divorce papers were served. I thought about my friends, who'd made it clear they viewed me as the villain in this story. I thought about my sister, my mother, and everyone else who was struggling to understand how I'd gotten from feeling trapped in my marriage to losing my family entirely. But mostly, I thought about Greg's face when I'd given him that ultimatum. The surprise, the hurt, And then something else, a kind of clarity that I'd mistaken for defeat. He'd never been controlling. He'd been careful. He'd been protecting what we'd built together. And when I'd forced him to choose between enabling my behavior and protecting our daughter, he'd made the choice I should have seen coming. I left the keys on the counter and walked out of the house, closing the door on the life I'd thrown away for the sake of one night with a friend who disappeared the moment things got complicated. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, working through court-ordered therapy and seeing Lila every other weekend under supervision. Greg had been right about the temporary nature of the custody arrangement. I was making progress, and my therapist was optimistic about eventually moving to unsupervised visitation. But Greg had also been right about us. The woman he'd married wouldn't have done what I did, and the man I'd divorced wasn't the controlling husband I'd convinced myself he was. He was just someone who'd loved me enough to fight for our marriage, right up until the moment I'd made it clear I was willing to throw it away.